Hey guys, welcome to another mission briefing. This one's going to be number 4, and it's going to deal with the Second Italo-Ethiopian War from 35 to 37. Specifically, we're going to cover the Christmas Offensive, which was really the only major Ethiopian counteroffensive during the whole war, and this took place from 15 December to 20 January of 36. So let's get into it. Ethiopia, also called Abyssinia by the native tribesmen of the region, is an inland country that lies on the Horn of Africa, sandwiched between Sudan in the west and Somaliland in the east. An interesting side note is that Ethiopia and Liberia, this country over here on the west coast of Africa, were actually the only two independent African countries not gobbled up by the Europeans during the Berlin Conference of 84-85. That's 1884-85. During the so-called Scramble for Africa, when the 7 major European powers decided to partition the countries in Africa. Ethiopia would remain independent, except for the few years it was conquered by the Italians in 37, before being restored at the end of World War II. Ethiopia is mountainous in the west, while the east leads into the Danakil Desert, which it shares with Somalia. Mountains in the west rise to 15,000 feet, and there are many plateaus at 7,000 feet. The country only has 3 important rivers: the Takizi, which is the start line for the Christmas offensive that we'll be talking about here, and that's essentially this river system here, and the Doria and Webi Shebeli rivers. With the Treaty of Bushale, signed on 2nd May 1889, Italy formally recognized Ethiopia as an independent country, while Ethiopia, for its part, recognized Italian Eritrea. There was a dispute in the treaty clause, however. There was actually 2 versions of this treaty, one with Italy and one with Ethiopia, that basically said that Ethiopia was a protectorate of Italy, basically meaning that it could not act independently without Italian approval, especially in terms of international negotiations. This would lead to the disastrous First Italo-Ethiopian War, which culminated in the Italian defeat at Adwa in March of 1896. There, a vastly superior Ethiopian army under Menelik II inflicted a humiliating defeat on the invading Italians, who had thought they could bully Ethiopia into complying with the clause in the treaty. The Battle of Adwa would remain a terrible memory in the Italian consciousness, leading many to believe that Italy should not get involved in colonialism or fight colonial wars. However, with the rise of the fascists in the 1920s, Adwa would become a rallying cry for them and would engender the expansionist policies of Mussolini and his party. The largely ineffective League of Nations, likely in a bid to secure Italian aid against an expanding and aggressive Germany, did not interfere when they set their sights on Ethiopia during the Wall incident. Thus, Italy invaded Ethiopia from Eritrea and Somaliland on 3 October 1935 without formally declaring war. This was in the form of a 2-pronged attack, and with their superior arms and technology against primarily tribespeople, would only take 4 months to subjugate the country, and forcing Emperor Halassie into exile in England, though fighting would continue for another year in the country and then in the form of partisans up until their country was freed in the 40s. Despite Germany's arming the Ethiopians with some modern arms, which was likely a piece of political maneuvering to get Italy to side with it when Germany was trying to annex Austria. This map shows the military actions from 1935 to February 1936, when the Italians regained the initiative and continued with their offensive. The Christmas offensive occurred at the top of the map between the Takiza River and the Eritrean border. And this map shows the action from February to May 36, when the capital of Addis Ababa was captured. While the war did drag on after its capture, lasting until February of 37, there were few field engagements that took place. After 1937, some segments of the Ethiopians would continue resisting until 41, when the country was finally restored under the Emperor Halassie. This is a brief overview of the timelines leading up to the war and its duration. The casus belli for the war was when the Italians built a fort at the Walwal Oasis, which is approximately 160 kilometers inside the Ethiopian borders from Italian Somaliland. And this was built in 1930. After a skirmish at the fort between the Italians and Ethiopians, sometime in early December 1934, the emperor pleaded his case at the League of Nations. The League, for its part, after months of deliberation and arbitration, exonerated both parties for their part in the skirmish without demanding that Italy leave the country. This would embolden Italy, which began to mobilize, and, using this Walwal incident as a reason, they conducted their invasion. Also of note is that following this incident, an arms embargo was placed on Ethiopia and Italy to limit hostilities, though the former, as it had no industries for such, came out the worse, while Italy ramped up its production. Germany, despite the embargo, would send in some arms, likely again in a bid to swing the Italians onto their side regarding the Austrian annexation. However, the form of their support only consisted of 3 planes and about 10,000 Mauser rifles. These are important dates for the Ethiopian Christmas offensive, which centered around isolating the Eritrean Native Corps positioned around Mekelle, while attacking the 1st and 2nd Corps on the Eritrean flanks. Regarding the use of mustard gas, according to one source I read, the General Badoglio only actually received permission on the 26th of December. However, there's reports of gas being used 4 days prior on the 22nd, as you saw on the previous slide. Comparing the two nations in the war shows a clear mismatch in capabilities, with a 500,000 or so poorly armed Ethiopians, generally with spears and swords, against the 600 plus tanks and 600 aircraft of the Italians. In addition, the Italians had 2,000 artillery pieces, machine guns, and many quick-firing rifles. By March 36, over 275,000 Italian soldiers had been ferried to Eritrea, while 67,000 had also been shipped to Somaliland. For the Christmas offensive, the emperor would organize his 4 northern armies into 3 groups, intending to attack in 3 directions simultaneously. The Italians under De Bono, whom Badoglio replaced on 16 November 1935, had been slowly pushing into Ethiopia. This slow pace of attack frustrated Mussolini, who replaced the aging General De Bono with a more aggressive general. Badoglio, for his part, was still mustering his forces to continue the advance when the offensive began. You can see the little tankette on the right, one of the many tanks that the Ethiopians were infamous for being able to flip over once they'd captured them in battle. In the 2 months since they first crossed the Ethiopian border from Eritrea, the Italians had made slow and steady progress until its fort elements had reached Mekelle and the Megabat River, which was a tributary of the Tekez. At this point, the fort elements were the Eritrean Native Corps with 1 corps on its left. However, the other corps in the area, 2 corps, was still back towards Axum, although some elements had reached the river, pushing forward. This meant that the Italians had created a slight wedge, pushed forward as they were. Emperor Halassie, therefore, decided to launch a counteroffensive, which, attacking again 3 directions, would sever the Eritrean and 1st Corps from their supply lines, while also attacking 2nd Corps in the west. Once the Eritreans were cut off, Ras Imru Selassie would continue on to Eritrea itself, once he had dealt with 2 Corps. This army of Gojam under the emperor's cousin, Ras Imru Selassie, began to cross the Takazi River in the west and immediately engaged the fort elements of 2 Corps at a small fort near Mai Timchet, taking it quickly. The next day, his forces caught the Italians at the Dimbeguina Pass, capturing several tanks, destroying others, and capturing many guns and machine guns from the fleeing Italians. This action is covered in ASL scenario number 254, Grenadi's Escape from the Hollow Legion's core module. It's the only ASL scenario I know of that covers some of the action during the Christmas offensive. There are 39 scenarios on Scenario Archive, which we'll get to at the end, which deal with the Ethiopian-Italian War in general. However, I think this is the only one I've been able to find that deals with actions during this time. In the center, the army of Tigray, under the Ras Seum and Cassas, pushed into the Eritreans and Italians, taking Adi, Amba Seleni, and forcing their retreat towards Weru Pass. The army of Bagemder on the right was to hold until the Italians and Eritreans began to move because of the actions in the center. Then they were to descend from their plateaus and crush both corps. In actuality, this third army never did much, and because the offensive at this point was lost. And the technology of the Italians was able to stall this offensive primarily because, again, aircraft and tanks and more machine guns than the Ethiopians. And in addition, using chemical agents sprayed by the aircraft would play a key role in stopping their assault. By early January, Italy had sent in 2 more corps into the area, which quickly made their way forward, and by 20 Jan, General Badoglio was prepared to continue the offensive, after which the Ethiopians never really regained the initiative. So what happened? Given the numbers involved, losses were relatively light for both sides, with the Italians bearing the brunt of the damage. The report of 4,700 prisoners was from foreign correspondents in Addis Ababa, based on reports on the time. However, they cannot confirm this because they were confined to that capital. And again, the Italians were trying to keep a lid on the losses they incurred due to this humiliating setback. And so it's hard to get accurate numbers. The numbers I am showing you were gleaned from Wikipedia. And again, I do not have access to those sources, so I cannot confirm any of these numbers. There are some discrepancies on the Italian losses, again, for those reasons I mentioned. And parsing out what was lost on both sides is very difficult. The number of 500 killed for the Ethiopians also seems light, given the aggressive use of gas and the technology from the Italians. So those numbers probably should be taken with a large grain of salt as well. All this said, in mid-February, the Italians began their renewed invasion, and they would actually capture the capital in May 1936. Again, as I said at the beginning, resistance would continue all the way up to 1941 when the country was taken back from the Italians. Regarding the use of mustard gas by Italy and the invasion of the country, Emperor Halassie did bring a complaint to the League of Nations. However, the Italians would respond in kind, claiming that the Ethiopians had used dum-dum bullets and tortured or massacred prisoners. If you don't know what a dum-dum bullet is, it's basically a hollow round which explodes on impact and creates a larger exit wound when it comes through the body. With the fear of a joint Germany and Italy alliance in the future, France pushed to appease Italy, and this was followed by Britain. Thus, the League denied Halassie's resolution that the League not recognize the conquest without affirming it. Further, they also denied a loan that the emperor had sought to finance a resistance movement, which basically left Ethiopia on its own. And the only country that actually condemned the aggression throughout the war would have been Mexico, from the 58-member nation in the League. And Great Britain and France would recognize its conquest in 1938, while Japan did so immediately after the capture of the capital in 1936. On Scenario Archive, again, as I mentioned, there's 39 scenarios that deal with the Ethiopian War. 8 are in the latest 3rd edition Hollow Legions, which I believe are updated and revised scenarios from the ELR Soldiers of the Negus pack. Now, that scenario pack was actually republished by Critical Hit in 1996. So, of these 39, 16 are essentially the same scenario with revisions. Lion of Judah is from Critical Hit as well, and I have no idea what that is. I don't have any Critical Hit products. It's part of their ATS system. So there's not much in the way of actions for the Italians and Ethiopians and Eritreans. Again, given the mismatch in capabilities, they probably could not find many interesting battles. And there's just not enough known, I don't think, about these wars to warrant writing up a whole bunch of scenarios. There we have it. That's the Ethiopians and the Italians' Second War from 35 to 37. And again, resistance continued all the way up to 1941. I tried to focus on one major campaign that the Ethiopians were the leading force on. By and large, it was a walkover for the Italians. It just, again, the technological advancement that they had over the relatively poorly armed tribesmen is just inevitable to happen, not to mention the numbers that they could bring to bear. You throw in mustard gas, and it was an unfortunate scene for the Ethiopians to endure. Those links, there's only two that I could use for some of my sourcing. Most of it was from Wikipedia, which again has issues, as we all know, if you've done any kind of research on that. It's not the most trustworthy source, and the writing sometimes isn't that great. And what I like to do is refer to that as a reference and then get into the material. But a lot of those books are older. They're not available from one of my university libraries I'm a member of. So it wasn't able to find that kind of information. So I had to use what was available on Wikipedia by and large. That first link you see there is from the Marines. It's a USMC manual on written around the late 30s, I believe, which deals with a couple of incidences, one of which was the Italian-Ethiopian War. And so while it's contemporary, again, because of the secretive nature of the losses incurred by the Italians, it's hard to pull that out of it. Again, exaggerations on the Ethiopian side just because of the numbers. When this was after the war, when reparations are on the table, obviously the more damage you can show, the more money you can gain. So some of that may have been exaggerated on purpose, not to minimize any of the losses that they did suffer. It was overall a very one-sided affair, barring this one Christmas offensive. So hopefully that's some information that'll make your Ethiopian, Eritrean, Italian plays a little better. Give you some background into the Christmas offensive, and hopefully you find it of use. So comments, questions, or information that I missed, please insert down the comments below. And you guys have a great day, and we'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye.